In 1878, Salt Lake Valley was still young, its streets dusty and its nights lit only by lanterns. But even in this rugged frontier, the Winthrops stood apart. Their mansion, a massive red stone structure, loomed over the town like a watchful sentinel. Locals called it the House on the Hill, and few dared to climb its steep driveway without invitation. Thomas Winthrop was known as the richest man in Utah. His mining operations, rail contracts, and banking ventures had made him untouchable. His wife, Margaret, was admired for her beauty and grace, often seen donating at church or hosting elegant socials. Yet, for all their charm, the family was shrouded in whispers. Children dared each other to run to the mansion's gates at night, claiming they saw strange shadows in the windows. Older folks said the Winthrops had bought their wealth with blood. No one could prove it. But everyone agreed. Behind those grand walls, something was hidden. Clara Jensen was only 17 when she entered the mansion as a maid. Her family lived on a failing farm, their crops wilted from drought. When she was offered a position at the Winthrop estate, she accepted eagerly. On her first day, she marveled at the vast halls lined with velvet drapes, polished marble floors, and chandeliers that sparkled like crystal rain. It was unlike anything she'd ever seen. But beneath the beauty, Clara sensed a chill. The air was too quiet, the servants too nervous. She noticed quickly how the other maids avoided speaking above a whisper, how they hurried their tasks as though being watched. And in the corners of their eyes lingered fear, fear of something Clara could not yet name. As night fell, and she lay in her narrow bed, Clara thought of her family back home, hungry but hopeful because of her wages. She promised herself she would endure anything. She did not yet know how heavy that promise would become. By her second week, Clara had learned the mansion's rhythms. Breakfast was served sharply at 7, silver polished at noon, floors scrubbed till they gleamed by evening. But there was one rule all servants whispered about: never step foot in the East Wing. The East Wing was a long corridor, its entrance sealed with an iron-bolted door. Dust gathered on its handle as though years had passed since it was touched. Servants avoided even walking near it. When Clara asked why, the cook shushed her harshly. "Don't ask, girl. Just keep your head down." One evening, Thomas Winthrop himself stopped Clara in the hall. His voice was deep, his eyes cold as steel. "You've heard the rules," he said, tapping his cane against the floor. "The East Wing is off limits. Break that rule, and you won't just lose your job, you'll lose far more." Clara nodded quickly, but his warning planted a seed of curiosity. Why would the wealthiest man in Utah fear his own house? It was near midnight when Clara first heard it. She had been scrubbing the tiled floor outside the dining hall when a sound drifted through the silence. At first she thought it was the wind, but no, the sound was unmistakable. A child's cry. Soft at first, then growing, it echoed through the empty corridors. Clara froze, her brush falling from her hand. Her heart pounded. She followed the sound, step by hesitant step, until she realized where it led. Directly to the East Wing. She pressed her ear against the heavy door. The sobbing was clearer now, fragile, broken, and achingly human. Yet the Winthrops had no children. Every servant knew that. Clara backed away, fear prickling her skin. She told herself she must have imagined it, that loneliness and exhaustion were playing tricks on her. Still, she could not sleep that night. In her dreams, she heard that same cry, echoing from behind locked doors. On Sundays, Clara accompanied the Winthrops to church, carrying Margaret's hymn book and folding her shawl. To the townsfolk, the Winthrops were perfection itself. Thomas walked proudly, his gold pocket watch glinting in the sunlight, greeting neighbors with a firm handshake. Margaret was radiant in silk dresses, her smile soft and gracious. The pastor praised their donations, thanking them for funding repairs to the chapel roof and supplying blankets to orphans. To all appearances, they were the valley's greatest benefactors. But Clara, standing silently at the edge of the pew, noticed details others missed. She saw how Margaret's hands trembled when hymns about forgiveness were sung. She saw how Thomas's jaw clenched when anyone mentioned children or family blessings. And though the townsfolk sang praises of the Winthrop's kindness, Clara could not erase the memory of that unseen child's cry, muffled behind a forbidden door. As weeks passed, Clara noticed peculiar deliveries to the mansion. Late at night, when most of the town slept, wagons would arrive at the back gate. Strong men unloaded heavy crates, always under the watchful eye of Thomas Winthrop. One night, curiosity got the better of her. Hiding in the shadows, Clara peeked as a crate split open. Inside lay raw meat, slabs of beef and mutton larger than any household could consume. And beside them, chains, thick and iron-forged, coiled like snakes. Clara gasped softly, covering her mouth. What kind of household needed such things? The next morning, she dared to ask the cook about the meat. The woman's eyes went wide with fear. She seized Clara's wrist tightly and hissed, "Child, don't ask questions you don't want answers to. If you wish to keep your life, keep your silence." Clara nodded, but inside her unease deepened. The pieces were beginning to form a pattern she was too afraid to finish. It wasn't long before Clara discovered another unsettling truth. Servants vanished from the Winthrop estate with alarming frequency. While polishing silver in the pantry, she overheard two older maids whispering, "First Samuel, now Lydia," one said, glancing nervously toward the east wing. "Always gone without a word, and always the same story. They left for better work. But have you ever seen one of them again?" Clara's hands trembled. That evening, she crept into the ledger room where the household accounts were kept. Her eyes scanned the payroll list. There it was. Samuel's name, wages unpaid. Lydia's, too. Both marked with nothing more than a line. Her stomach knotted. They hadn't left. Something else had happened. Something the Winthrops wanted hidden. Clara shut the ledger quickly, heart hammering. She had entered the mansion to earn an honest wage, but she had stepped into a place where people disappeared, and no one dared to speak of it. Clara soon began to notice Margaret Winthrop in new ways. For all her grace and beauty, the mistress carried a sorrow that could not be disguised. One evening, while tending the garden lanterns, Clara spotted Margaret sitting alone among the roses. Her silk gown rustled in the breeze as she gazed at the stars. For once, she looked neither regal nor proud, only broken. Clara hesitated, then softly asked if she needed anything. Margaret turned, her eyes glistening. "Tell me, Clara," she whispered, her voice trembling, "do you believe that sins of parents fall upon their children?" Clara, startled, stammered that she didn't know. Margaret gave a bitter smile, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Nor do I," she said softly. "But if it is true, heaven help us." Before Clara could respond, Margaret rose and walked away into the shadows. Clara stood frozen, a chill settling over her. She realized that Margaret, too, was haunted by whatever secret the mansion kept. Rain lashed against the windows one stormy night, wind howling through the eaves. Clara, finishing her chores late, passed by the east wing. To her shock, she saw the iron-bolted door slightly ajar. Her breath caught. Candlelight flickered faintly inside, and with it came the unmistakable sound of chains rattling, and something else. A low, guttural growl. Every instinct told her to run, but her feet carried her forward. She pushed the door open a little more. The air inside was damp, metallic with the scent of rust, or perhaps blood. Shadows stretched long across the stone floor. Her heart thundered as she strained her eyes in the dim light. She could see the outline of something moving. Not quite a man, not quite a beast. Its breathing was heavy, labored. Clara gasped, slamming the door shut in terror. She fled down the hall, trembling. Whatever was hidden in the east wing was alive. Clara's fear warred with curiosity. The following night, she returned, carrying a small lantern. This time she stepped inside. The room was damp and cold, its walls lined with chains. In the corner, crouched against the wall, was a boy. He could not have been more than 12. His wrists were shackled, raw from the iron. His hair hung in matted tangles. His skin bore strange scars, and his eyes, glowing faintly like an animal's, met hers with a mix of defiance and despair. Clara's breath caught. He bared his teeth, sharp and unnatural, yet behind the ferocity was something unmistakable. Fear. For a long moment, neither moved. Then, in a trembling voice, the boy whispered, "Please, don't tell." Clara staggered back, lantern shaking in her hand. The Winthrop's monstrous secret was not a ghost, not a legend. It was a child, their child. The next morning, Clara could barely bring herself to serve breakfast. Her hands shook as she poured tea, her mind racing with the image of the chained boy. She half expected Thomas Winthrop to thunder down and accuse her of trespassing, but it was Margaret who found her. The mistress's eyes were red, as though she had not slept. She guided Clara into a quiet sitting room, shutting the door firmly. "You saw him, didn't you?" Margaret whispered. Clara froze. There was no use denying it. She nodded slowly. Margaret's lips trembled. "His name is Elias. He is my son." Tears welled as she spoke. "When he was born, the doctors called him cursed. They said no human child should have eyes that glow or teeth that sharpen like a beast's. My husband wanted to send him away, but I could not. I begged Thomas to let him live, so he locked him away instead." Her voice broke. "He is not a monster, Clara. He is my child. But Thomas would rather chain him in darkness than risk losing his empire." Clara's heart ached with pity, but her secret didn't last long. That evening, Thomas Winthrop summoned her to his study. The door slammed shut behind her. His towering figure loomed, eyes blazing like steel. "You entered the East Wing," he growled. "Do you think I don't know?" He slammed his cane on the floor, making Clara flinch. "That boy is not your concern. Speak of him to anyone, and you'll disappear like the others before you." Clara's stomach dropped. The missing servants. He had silenced them. Her knees trembled, but she forced herself to whisper, "He's just a child." Thomas's face twisted with rage. "He's no child. He's a curse upon this family. If the town learns, we lose everything. Our mines, our banks, our place in this valley. Do you understand?" Clara nodded quickly, but inside, she knew something Thomas didn't. The more he tried to bury Elias in chains, the more her resolve to help him grew. Despite the danger, Clara couldn't abandon Elias. Late at night, she slipped into the East Wing, carrying scraps of bread and a flask of water. At first, Elias snarled, his sharp teeth flashing, but hunger and loneliness softened him. Slowly, he reached for the bread with trembling hands. For days, this became their secret ritual. She listened to him whisper in the dark, how he longed to see the sky, how he remembered his mother singing to him as a baby, how he hated the chains that cut into his skin. One night, as Clara wiped his wounds with a damp cloth, Elias looked at her with eyes full of gratitude. His voice cracked. "Thank you." In that moment, Clara no longer saw a monster. She saw a boy, starved not just of food, but of kindness. And in her heart, she made a silent vow. She would never let him believe he was unworthy of love. Curiosity gnawed at Clara until one afternoon she found herself in the library. Dusty shelves lined with books towered above her, but hidden among them she discovered something else. Margaret's old leather-bound journal. She hesitated, then opened it. The faded ink told a painful story. Elias had been born on a snow-struck night, stronger than any infant should be, his cries echoing through the valley. Rumors spread quickly. Some said he was touched by the devil, others whispered of curses. Thomas, desperate to protect his reputation, had made the decision. Better to chain him in secrecy than lose everything, one entry read in Margaret's trembling hand. Another page described how Margaret had begged to raise him openly, but Thomas struck her down with cold words. You will choose your family's fortune over your freak child. Clara closed the journal, tears blurring her vision. Elias wasn't cursed. He was a prisoner of his father's pride. The turning point came one moonless night. A messenger arrived at the mansion, breathless and shouting, "The Winthrop mine is burning." Dozens are trapped inside. Panic swept through the valley. Families of miners gathered, wailing for their husbands and sons. The flames lit the night sky, devouring wooden beams and belching black smoke. The townsfolk begged Thomas for help, but Thomas stood apart, his jaw rigid. "It's too dangerous," he barked. "The fire will take anyone who enters. We can rebuild the mine. I will not waste lives foolishly." Clara, among the crowd, felt Elias's chains tugging at her heart. She slipped back to the mansion, racing down the forbidden corridor. Elias looked up at her, desperation in his glowing eyes. "Set me free," he begged, straining against his bonds. "I can help them." Clara's hands trembled. She knew the risk. If she freed him, she would lose everything. But if she didn't, dozens of innocent men would die. With a deep breath, Clara reached into her apron. She had stolen the keys from Thomas's study. Heart pounding, she unlocked the shackles one by one. The final chain clattered to the floor, and for the first time, Elias stood tall. His limbs were scarred but strong, his back straight despite years of confinement. He looked at Clara with something between fear and hope. "Come," she whispered. Together they fled the mansion, sprinting toward the roaring blaze. When the townsfolk saw Elias, gasps of horror rippled through the crowd. Mothers shielded their children, men stepped back in fear. "What is that thing?" someone cried, but Clara shouted above the chaos. "He is here to save your husbands, your fathers, your sons." And before anyone could stop him, Elias plunged into the inferno. Inside the mine, heat seared his skin, but Elias pressed on. Where others would have perished, his unnatural strength carried him forward. He tore fallen beams apart with his bare hands, lifting rubble that 10 men could not. One by one, he carried trapped miners out into the night. Their soot-covered faces were etched with disbelief. "He saved me," one whispered, voice breaking. Again and again, Elias returned to the flames, refusing to stop. Clara stood outside, tears streaming, praying with every heartbeat that he would emerge alive. At last, as the fire began to die, Elias staggered out with the final miner over his shoulder. His hair singed, his skin blistered, he collapsed on the ground. The valley fell silent, staring not at a monster, but at a savior. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then one of the rescued miners, an old man with a broken arm, raised his voice. "He's no curse. He's a blessing." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Mothers who had feared him now wept in gratitude. Men who once whispered about curses now bowed their heads. Elias had saved more than 20 lives that night, lives Thomas Winthrop would have sacrificed for profit. Margaret rushed forward, cradling Elias in her arms, sobbing with relief. Clara stood beside them, fierce with pride. The people of Salt Lake Valley faced a choice that night: cling to fear or embrace the truth. Slowly, one by one, they chose the latter. They no longer saw a beast. They saw a boy with a heart greater than the chains that had bound him. Thomas arrived at the scene, furious. "Get him back inside!" he thundered, pointing his cane at Elias. "You fools! Don't you see what he is?" But the townsfolk did not move. For the first time, they stood against him. A miner stepped forward, his face still blackened from smoke. "What he is, Mr. Winthrop, is the reason we're alive. While you stood counting your fortune, your son was saving lives." Thomas's face turned red with rage. "He will ruin us all," he shouted. But Margaret rose to her feet, her voice steady. "No, Thomas. It is you who has ruined us, with your pride, your greed, your chains. No more." Her words struck harder than any flame. The crowd, once under Thomas's power, now looked at him with contempt. Wealth could no longer shield him. That night, the mighty Thomas Winthrop fell, not by fire, but by truth. In the weeks that followed, the Winthrop mansion changed. Its gates were no longer symbols of fear, but of healing. Elias, though never fully like other children, was embraced as a hero. He roamed the valley freely, his strength used not for destruction, but for protection. Clara remained by his side, the first friend who had ever shown him kindness. Margaret, no longer silent, poured her heart into making Elias's life full of love. And though scars lingered, both inside and out, Elias began to believe what Clara always told him. You are not a curse. You are a gift. The Winthrop fortune dwindled, but the valley gained something greater: compassion, courage, and the lesson that true wealth is not measured in gold, but in how we treat the most vulnerable among us. And as Clara grew older, she often told the story of the boy in chains, the one the world called Monstrous, until love broke the locks and revealed a heart more human than any. Sometimes, the monsters we fear are not born. They are made by chains of pride and shame. And sometimes, the bravest act is simply to see the humanity that others refuse to see.